Chapter 13. Recovery. Claudia.
When I opened my eyes, he was seated by my side. He smiled as I gazed up at him. His hand stroked back my hair. I felt the tips of his fingers. Just beneath the surface, there was desire and fear that he could have lost me. The energy pulsated between us. It was strong, powerful, and alien. I needed to see you to make sure you were okay. When I left to seek help, you were in so much pain. I could feel it ripping through the lower part of your body. I hated that I couldn't do anything to help you. I'm a biochemist, unfortunately. Quentin grinned. He looked so tame, so fragile in that moment. It was like looking at another person. His lovely dark locks of hair fell to one side of his head. The color of his eyes was dark, strange, and unnatural, but filled with beauty. He pushed back my hair and stroked a finger down my cheek. I feel your pulse at balance again. Quentin smiled and leaned forward. You're shaking. Why are you scared? You know me, my love. There is nothing to be frightened of. He neared to kiss me. I recoiled from him and turned my face away. He froze, glaring down. Quentin, I don't belong with you. I don't. I shuddered. Shh. Say no more. You're delirious, my love. Their chemicals are running through your veins and making you say rubbish. No, I mean it. You think I am this pet Tricia. But I'm not. I'm not her. Quentin grabbed my face, squeezed my cheeks hard. Once he had my attention, he eased his grip and stared into my eyes. You're under their control. They fed you lies. I see who you truly are. I know you can't remember, but with time, you will, and you will not deny me your love. I need you, pet Tricia. You don't know how lonely this existence has been without you. He leaned forward. His lips grew closer. The way he held my head, there was no escape. A sound from behind startled him and he released me. He spun his head towards the door. I followed his lead and glanced towards the entrance when it opened. I looked back to the side of my bed. Q was gone. The nurse entered. I wanted to tell her what had taken place, but she wouldn't have believed me if I'd tried. She came around and checked the IV. I laid very still. On the wall in front of me, a figure crawled onto the ceiling. At first it was just a black spot, like a stain on the wall. Then, slowly, it began to resemble something of a person. I recognized the black suit and red tie. His arms stretched unnaturally up the ceiling above us. The nurse didn't see what was happening. His arms dropped down to extend over the bed. You doing okay, darling? The nurse asked. Did you want some water? What's wrong? I looked up. She followed my gaze slowly. When she did see it, she jumped back and almost knocked over the small table behind her. The shadow tentacles lashed out and entered her mouth when she screamed. Its arms retracted and she stood up very still. In her eyes, blackness swirled. Just as quick as it came, the darkness vanished, and I could once again see the pupils of her brown eyes. Above, the shadow thing vanished into the ceiling. The nurse stood over my bed, but it wasn't her any longer. The man in the black suit and red tie had taken over the image of the kind, elderly black nurse. Hello, Miss Bell. I've come for you. I can be anyone, anywhere. I will do anything to possess you, darling. Long tentacles emerged from out of his back and reached out to grab me. When they made contact with my arm, they reacted as if my skin burned them. A look of panic distorted his features. He shrieked, pushed himself back against the wall by my bed, and disappeared. I screamed as I wrestled myself up. The pain shot through me. It was what awakened me. I opened my eyes and slowly came aware. There was a nurse standing at my bedside. She pushed me back against the bed. It's all right. Relax. I stared up at her, looking around for that thing. Had it only been a dream? "Are you okay, honey?" I settled down and took a breath. "Did you have a bad dream?" she softly asked, smiling. I glanced up as she checked the IV and took some notes on her clipboard. I looked up at her, fearing I would see something else in her brown eyes. But when there was nothing, I relaxed. I exhaled. "Where am I?" "Memorial Hospital. Don't you remember, sweetheart? Your appendix ruptured." I thought about it. A flash of the pain in my stomach. Q's words about being unable to help me. Everything started to fall into place. "My appendix?" I asked. She took more notes on her computer tablet and nodded. "Can I get you something? Unfortunately, you'll be on a liquid diet for a bit. I can get you some nice hot broth for lunch. But on the plus side, you can have ice cream." She smiled and winked. "How's the patient doing?" I heard a voice as the door opened. A young man with a full head of dark curls entered the room. His dark brown eyes smiled over at me as he approached the side of my bed. "She's awake. How are her vitals?" he asked the nurse. She handed him the tablet. "All looks well, Dr. Spencer." "Good. How do you feel, Miss Slater?" he asked. I wrinkled my nose at him. The name sounded strange when he said it out loud. I couldn't figure out how he'd come to call me that, though. John must have given him that name. I was able to verify this fact from the thoughts in my head. I wondered if John had heard me calling to him. His reply told me he had. "Claudia, are you okay?" "Yes. I miss you." I saw him smiling in my mind. "I miss you too." The nurse walked out. Dr. Spencer caught the expression in my eyes. "John's your boyfriend, correct?" Dr. Spencer's words drew me back to where I was. "I know Slater isn't your last name. I told John to say he was your husband, so he could come into the room and help you before surgery. Things might be a little hazy. I know you were in a lot of pain." "Oh," was all I said. "So what is it? Your last name, I mean?" Dr. Spencer asked. I could see the questions in his mind. Could John's reason for giving another name just to be in the room with me? I had a feeling John had given his last name for a reason other than to be in the same room, and Dr. Spencer was catching on to that. "Slater," I answered. He smiled. "Okay, then." "It's on the form, isn't it?" I boldly asked. He gave me a look. He wondered how I had known that. He avoided the question. "So how do you feel?" "Hungry?" "Yeah, I believe Nurse Janice has you down for soup and yogurt." "How about a turkey burger and fries?" Dr. Spencer chuckled. "I'm afraid not for a little while. Right now you'll have to be on a liquid diet." "Oh, will I be able to attend prom?" "The dress might not fit anymore," I muttered, only realizing the implications of the surgery. "Does it look bad?" I asked about the scar. Dr. Spencer immediately understood what I was getting at. "It doesn't look bad at all," he offered as I pointed to my lower abdomen. I wrinkled my nose, wanting to look at my stitches. "Well, let's play it by ear, though. When is prom?" "Next week." Dr. Spencer twisted his lips slightly. "Well then, no, unfortunately. You'll need 4 weeks to recover." He looked disappointed for me. I dropped on the bed and bit my lips until it hurt. Even just dropping my head on the pillow made the pain in my lower body ache. "I'm really sorry." His dark eyes smiled down at me. "I've asked the nurse to allow your family back here to see you." A second after he said that, the door opened and Michael, John, and Joseph entered the room. John was the first to come to the side of the bed and take his place by my side. He gripped my hand as he leaned forward to kiss me. A breath escaped him as our lips touched. He pulled back with difficulty. "What's wrong?" I asked. I was so worried. I smiled and squeezed John's hand. I was a little embarrassed when I caught Dr. Spencer looking over at us. "He seems nice," I thought to John, who agreed. "I like him," I decided. "He said I can have ice cream." John laughed softly as I shrugged. Dr. Spencer caught us smiling at each other. Our private conversation may have seemed a little odd. "Oh, you're too grown up for ice cream?" John poked fun. I didn't say that, I said out loud and put a hand over my mouth. Dr. Spencer looked over. I avoided his eyes. I like him too, he privately admitted to me. He said I won't be able to attend prom. I'll be recovering for 4 weeks. I pulled at John's hand. Come on, cheer up, Miss Bell. We'll figure out something. Claudia! Michael came to stand by the bed on the opposite side of John. He reached down and gave me a gentle hug, kissing me on the cheek. Then he pulled away to look at me. You're looking well, my dear. I had frightened everyone, but it was more readable on Michael's face. Dr. Spencer has been taking good care of me, I said. Catching the doctor by surprise, he looked up from his medical tablet. You're just a very good patient. I wish I had more like you, he admitted. I'm glad you're all right, Michael said. I felt protected by all the attention I was getting. Thanks to John, I said. Michael agreed and patted John's shoulder, gently moving back. Dr. Spencer appeared on the other side of the bed. I curiously looked over at him. His dark brown eyes regarded me carefully. I caught a single image from his mind before it vanished. I cringed. My expression must have pulled him away from whatever he was thinking about. You still feeling pain? Dr. Spencer asked. Just a little, I said. Dr. Spencer moved a few dials on the machine beside the bed, reading my vitals. I didn't know what all the switches or strange beeps meant. Some were easy to tell what they did, like the one for blood pressure and heart rate. I felt a cold liquid rush up my arm and into the rest of my body, and the pain eased. He must have released some medication into my IV, because I think whatever he had put in my IV was making me giddy. Joseph moved closer. I caught him lingering in the back. Joseph, I happily called. He looked quizzically over at me. What are you doing in the back? Come closer, I encouraged. A grin spread over his face. What has the doctor been putting in your IV? You sound fairly well. Are you sure you're sick? I laughed. It's nice to see you're okay, honey. You gave my nephew a heart attack. I've never seen this guy cry before. It was quite frightening and embarrassing. Regardless of his words, Joseph seemed distant, like something else was occupying his mind. Shut up, John muttered. Joseph laughed. Are you okay, Joseph? I asked. He looked surprised for a split second. Oh, yeah, you just gave us a scare there, Miss Bell. I'm glad you're doing better. If it wasn't for the watch, I would have curiously looked into his thoughts to see what was bothering him. I didn't have to read him to know something was on his mind, though. I gripped a hold of John's hand and he grinned. I knew it was true. John had sensed it too. Something was on Joseph's mind. I caught Dr. Spencer watching us. He looked distracted by our warm display. I sensed he longed for something similar, friends and a family. He had none. He was so involved in his work, and he loved what he did, which made him a great doctor. That made me sad. He seemed like a great person. I could feel nothing menacing coming from him. His feelings were clear to see. He seemed fragile with his emotions. You have a nice family, Dr. Spencer said as he cleared his throat. There was warmth in his eyes. A nurse arrived with a meal for me as the rest of my family took a seat on the chairs around my bed. There was a single sofa to my left, the same area where I had witnessed the entity disappear. John glanced over at me when the thought entered my mind again. I lowered my gaze. He knew. I merged my thoughts with him. It was a dream, I said before he could question what he saw. John gripped my hand tighter. I believe he's trying to convince you of that. He's more real than you think, Miss Bell. I wish you could stay with me. Or the other way around. That way I could keep you safe. This is not working. The nurse pushed a table close to my bed with the tray upon it. She pulled off the tray lid, revealing a bowl of watery soup, a dish of Jell-O, a container of yogurt, and a hot tea faced me. I stared at the food in utter disgust as I picked up the spoon and dipped it into the soup. It tasted like barely flavored water. The nurse leaned slightly over and smiled. I'll bring you some ice cream when you're done with this. She grinned. Did she honestly think she was doing me a favor?
Come on, cheer up, Miss Bell.
John smiled over at me from the chair. I wrinkled the lips slightly back and dropped the spoon to the side of the bowl. I know it doesn't look so appetizing, but it's only for a bit until you're able to eat solids, Dr. Spencer said. John took a spoonful of the soup. It was too runny for him to even keep any on the spoon, so instead he picked up the bowl. The nurse left, and I caught Joseph coming to the other side of my bed. He was examining the instruments on the monitor with my vitals. Did he know what any of those things said or meant? I wondered. He does. You'd be surprised at what Joseph knows. He has to be able to give medical aid in case I need it. Wow, what doesn't he know? I guess I should ask that instead, then. John smiled, lifting the spoon close with the bowl beneath to keep any of the soup from spilling. I pressed my lips tightly together. Come on, Miss Bell. Open up, John playfully said, pushing the spoon to me. I furrowed my eyes at him. Very funny, Mr. Slater. I don't think I can stomach that.
Doctor's orders, Miss Bell,
he joked. I opened my mouth and I took the offered spoonful. I nearly spit it out. The soup was awful. Somehow I managed to swallow it. It takes some time getting used to, Dr. Spencer said. Let me know if you guys need anything. Dr. Spencer! Michael rose and walked over. He and Dr. Spencer stepped just outside the open door. I couldn't quite hear their conversation, but from what I could sense in their thoughts, Michael wanted to know when I would be able to leave.
Don't worry, Squirt. You'll be out by tomorrow,
Joseph said.
Squirt. I wrinkled my nose up at Joseph as he took a seat on the sofa to the left of my bed. I did my homework on our dear Dr. Spencer. He graduated at the top of his class. He's legit, definitely on the up and up. By the looks of your doctor, he's on the 3rd year of his residency, so he's still cautious. Usually an extra day for the appendectomy is the norm.
John was smiling at me when I looked over at him. He winked at me. Joseph did know a lot.
You'll have a lot of bed recovery ahead of you, though. I'm sure John will be happy to help with that.
He grinned.
John blushed.
And so did I. Squirt, I said out loud.
That just means Joseph's comfortable with you, Miss Bell.
Joseph gave me a grin and winked. John started laughing as he finished cleaning off the spoon with a napkin, motioning to the yogurt and Jell-O. I pointed to the yogurt first. I had never been much for Jell-O. Michael re-entered the room with the news we already knew thanks to Joseph. John fed me the rest of the soup, which I struggled to eat. I had a little of the yogurt, and after a bit, the nurse did return with ice cream.